What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. Of course, this is TWA Motorsports, and today we are back on the Tahoe. Now, I know it's filthy. It's probably the dirtiest you guys have ever seen it, but it rained yesterday, and today's the first nice day. It's a little windy, but it's nice. And to be honest with you, to wash this thing correctly, it takes me like 3 hours, and I would rather spend that time doing something new. I will wash it probably later on today, but I want to get this done while it's daylight. So what are we doing? Well, we are working on the radio. So a couple videos back, you guys saw me take the old radio out of the Buick out there and put the stock one back in, and so that is the radio I think I'm going to use to put into the Tahoe. Now, I did have to order a new interface because the one that's in the Buick wouldn't work. But while we're doing all that, I also got a backup camera. Now, I am not a huge fan of license plate mounted backup cameras, but there's really no other option. Now, could I get really in depth and take this out and put the camera there? Yeah, I probably could, but guys, I don't want to mess with that. If you guys remember, I bought this for a daily driver for the winter, so I'm not looking to spend a ton of time on paint and money on that stuff. But I do want to do some upgrades. So I am going to put this in today. And so I'm going to kind of walk you guys through the process of not only wiring, but pulling out the old radio. And this one, you know, it works fine, but the knobs are all worn off. And to be honest with you, I just want a touch screen that I can hook my phone to, because right now I can't hook my phone to it. And I'm still rocking the free XM. So the guy that I bought this from, I don't know if he paid for like 3 years or if he's just continually paying and has no idea, but it is still working. So I'm going to leave this ugly amber lit old school XM receiver in place. And it's also got under this seat the receiver box. You guys know I complain about the antenna as well, but all that's for the XM. So anyway, I think the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to pop the radio out and see exactly what we have to work with. I'm pretty sure I got the right harness, but there's like 50 different harnesses, guys, and I chose to bypass the OnStar option. I never use it, nor will I, and as a matter of fact, I think because it's an 03, the OnStar probably doesn't even work because it's an old analog signal or early digital signal, so chances are it probably doesn't work anyway. So I'm going to go grab some tools, and really all we need here is a 7mm to pull this out, and we'll pop this loose and we'll get started. So the very first thing we need to do, obviously, is get the old radio out. So in order to do that, we have to get this bezel off. And a lot of people hit the emergency brake to keep the car from rolling, but I just keep my foot on the brake, put it down into first gear, the lowest gear, and then this literally just pops forward. And then we're gonna pull it out. One of my little rubber snub deals just flipped off into the floor. I'll grab that before we put it back together. So set that aside. You can go ahead and put it back into place, and we'll get the key out of here and turn the lights off. All right, so now we just have 3 7mm that hold this radio in. So we're gonna pop these out. Now we can pull the radio straight back, and oh my goodness, this is a long radio. We're gonna unplug this thing. Looks like it's had a couple things patched into it at some point. This does have a backup sensor, an aftermarket backup sensor, so that could be part of what they tried to tap into or something. I'm not real sure. Can't see why my plug's not working here. There we go. So once you get that out, just set this aside. And a lot of times, guys, on these newer radios, they're too deep, and so there's a metal piece back here, and I'll show you here in a minute if I have to move it. So what I'm going to do, the very first thing I'm going to do is kind of tuck these wires back in the back, and we're going to test fit the radio and make sure that it's going to basically set where it needs to set. Now, if it doesn't, we're probably going to have to trim this back here, which is not a big deal. I've had to do that in the past, but we'll check it out. I'm going to go grab the radio real quick, and we'll kind of see what we've got. So I messed around with the mounting tabs on the side, and you just have to kind of move them around, see where you like it, and it looks like it might go back in there without having to trim that. However, it looks like this side is sticking out a little, so I need to move my plate on this side just a hair. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back down and drive. I'm going to test fit my panel to see kind of how everything lines up, and if I like it, then I'm going to go ahead and start the wiring process. But if not, then we'll take it out and just keep making adjustments. So that's just kind of one of those things, guys. These kits are meant for 15 different cars, or probably more than that, honestly. And so you're going to have to make some adjustments here, and that's just based off depth and you know, kind of where you want it up and down. Now, most of these, like, they have a right and a left as far as these go, and because there's 2 bolts on this side and 1 bolt on the other, and then a centering pin, you know, it's pretty dummy proof, but you may have to make some adjustments, that's for sure. So as you can see, I put the bezel back on, and actually, guys, I like the gap here. It's equal on all 4 sides, so I think this is good. I think we're going to go with this. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten those set screws on the side of these brackets, and we'll get to some wiring. So I went and got my pack harness here, and everything seems to clip into place like it's supposed to. So I do believe that we have the right harness. Now I do also have an adapter, because I don't believe our new radio takes the small version. I think it takes a Motorola, which is the bigger one, and it does. So I do have an adapter for that as well. But what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to go in and I'm going to wire this all up. So I'm going to solder all my connections, make sure everything's good and hooked up, and then we'll come back out and plug this thing in. Now, obviously we're going to put a camera in, so there's going to be more to it than just me wiring this. But I'm going to take care of the radio portion for now, make sure that everything works, and then we'll move on to like how the camera functions and all that functionality. So I have all this wired up, and guys, I solder all my connections and use heat shrink. I just think that's the best way to do it. So there's a couple things you need to know depending on what radio you use with this pack harness that I'm using. This guy for your steering wheel controls, because I hate losing that when I put in a radio. On a JVC radio like what I'm using, you have to hook up a regular wire. Some radios don't require that, so you'll just have to know what radio, and it tells you in the instructions. The other thing is, before we hook all this up, you have to select what type of radio you have, and there's a little piece here that covers that, so you can't plug it in actually, and I need to go ahead and peel that off. Anyway, you can't plug it in until you set the little dip switch, is what I would call it, on the side. Holy cow, that is on there. So anyway, before we plug it in, you need to make sure, because we're using a JVC radio, you need to use a small screwdriver. It's almost like an amplifier, and select number 2 for a JVC radio. Now the same thing applies if you're using a different radio or whatnot. But now we should be able to plug this interface in, and what I'm going to do before obviously we put anything in is I'm going to test it to make sure that we have radio. The other thing I've done is, you'll notice that I have my harness adapter. This little guy won't plug into the back of the radio, so you need to go from GM to what they call Motorola, and Motorola is the standard size plug. So we're going to test it. I'm going to plug this guy in, and these wires that aren't hooked up here, guys, I'm going to tape those off, but that's for the rear entertainment, and I'm not concerned about that either. That's just that rear radio, and honestly, I've never used it. So we'll plug this in, and we will plug our radio antenna in, and we're just going to test for now. So see if it comes on. It's beeping, which is good, and the radio's coming on, but we'll see if we have any sound, because honestly that's really what I'm concerned about. I don't really care about that right now. And I have no sound. So let's make sure everything's plugged in. Sometimes these radios, if they don't find a station, they won't make any noise. It's not finding a station. So I may have to hook it up. Honestly, my antenna must not be making a good connection. Let's keep trying here. Yeah, it's not finding a station. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to get a different antenna adapter, I have a feeling, because this one is not wanting to fly. So guys, I've been sitting here messing with it, and the reason it didn't work is because the amp wasn't getting power, and this is a Bose system. So I literally had to hook up one wire, and that was my issue. So I'm gonna go back in, I'm gonna solder that connection, and we should be good to go at that point. So we'll start maybe getting some of the camera functions set up and try to wire in our camera, our backup camera. So at this point, guys, all the wires are working. We got that antenna wire, or that remote wire, hooked up for the Bose amp, and that was, honestly, that was the problem. It wasn't this. Even though I don't really care for this connection, it doesn't seem like it's really snug. I might put a little tape around that too. But the other thing is for our reverse camera. So your reverse camera comes with a long wire. Now normally what you'd have to do is you'd have to tie in to your reverse lights, but the really cool thing about this pack harness is it actually has a wire for that. So I did go ahead and hook that up, and I really wish that it was wired in with the radio, because it's a separate plug on the back of the JVC radio. You can see here. So it's just another connection that I have to undo. So, but that tells it when you are in reverse, and it does work. I checked it with the voltage meter, and it does say that. So that's one less wire we have to run, although they do make it kind of nice, because instead of having to run an extra wire, they do include that on the harness. So I'm just gonna snap that off and tape this up. But I'm gonna go ahead and thread this wire down into the dash, because we're actually gonna have to go to the back where this hooks up to your backup camera. So I'm gonna go ahead and thread this in there. I'm gonna kind of tidy up some of this wires with some of these zip ties, so everything's just not hanging out here, and then we'll just shove this back into the dash and get everything back into place. But everything up here is working. The majority of the rest of our wiring is in the back. Now the other thing I didn't hook up is it does have an external microphone, which in the past I have hooked up, but I will tell you, I had it in the Buick and my wife could never hear me or anybody else when they called me, so I'm just not even going to bother with hooking that up. That's one of those things, just route through the dash and maybe up here on the pillar, but they just don't work real great. So I'm gonna go ahead, like I said, get all this tidied up, get it put back in the dash, and then we will put our 7mm back in. That way everything's snug, and then we'll talk about how we're gonna route that RCA from where I pull it out under the dash here to the back. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but I had to push all the wires back in. There's an area between the very center and over here on the gauge cluster. So I was able to fish all those wires back into that area. That's the only way you're going to be able to get the radios to set flush. And so we're good to go back together. I'm going to grab the radio bezel, and I got to find that piece that flew off earlier, that little rubber piece that sets in here, and we'll get that back into place. So now that we have the radio back in, the bezel back on, we are ready to run the line back to the back. Now we should have enough, or so I hope. And the cool thing is, guys, I told you, I don't know if you remember this, but when I first bought this, this has park assist. So that's what those two screws are right there. And so basically I'm going to trace that wire, which I would run it the same way anyway. I'm going to run it down the pillar here, and all the way underneath all of these hard plastics. Now we'll probably have to snap those out of the way. I'm going to loop over everything to get to that point, and then we'll start removing these hard plastics and running it to the back. Now once we get to the back, then we'll obviously have some more hookup to do, but we'll get this started first, and then once we get to the back, I'll show you what you need to wire up. So as you can see, I went under this onto where all these other wires are ran down the side here, underneath this pillar, and then we've made it back here to the back, where now I'm going to have to go behind the seat belt and back up into the very back in that back corner. So now we're in the back, and I'm just going to go underneath this and into this compartment. I went ahead and took out basically where your spare tire jack or your jack is, and I think there's going to be a hole back here behind the light. So we're going to take the light out and see if there's a grommet that maybe I can push this through once I route it through there. Routing it through here, guys, is very simple. Just tuck it up between the plastic and the carpet, and you can reach back in this hole here and grab the other end of it. But I'm going to go ahead, grab my Phillips screwdriver, and take both of these two screws out that hold the tail light into place, and we'll see if we can find an area to pass it through. So now with the tail light out, you can see that they did have a grommet, or they do have a grommet up there, but there's no way I have enough room to get through there, which is fine. That's not a big deal. So what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to, instead of going out there, I'm going to route back to right here, and we're going to come through underneath all of this stuff. So you'd still have to tie in to the reverse light, which you can see they have a ground here, and they've already tapped in for this backup sensors that they have. But I mean, essentially we're doing the same thing. So we'll just tap into the tap, I guess you could say, and I'll probably use the same ground, to be honest with you. I'll probably put them all on one ring, but I'm going to go ahead, snap this out of the way, and see if we can pull the carpet up and see if there's a good pass-through point. Now, normally I'm not one to run stuff underneath trim, but because you can't really see this with it closed, I might go in between this and up under, and then underneath the body of the car. We'll just see how much room we have. I really don't want to pinch any wires, but I also really don't want to drill any holes. But once we get this plastic out of the way, maybe we'll have another option. So at this point, I went ahead and removed this, and there's no spot to bring it through. So what I think I'm going to do is, normally I don't like to do this, but I'm going to come back behind. So I'm going to go under the license plate frame, back behind, and I'm going to come up through here, and I'm going to make all my connections under the carpet. So there's enough room here where it's not going to pinch the wire. And could you drill a hole? Yes, but honestly, I don't want to drill a hole if I don't have to. And there's enough give right here for me to sneak it in this this spot. So that is what I'm going to do, guys. And the other thing is, obviously, we have a power wire. We've got to tap in. Show you here. So this guy here, and what I was normally going to do is run from the lights, or from the bucket over here, the tail light under the truck. But what I think I'm going to do is, I do have enough room to sneak this through that grommet, at least the wire ends anyway. So I'm going to sneak those through that grommet that's already there, and I'm going to make all of my connections on the inside of the car. So now I've got all the wires ran under the carpet, at least to the center here, and I was able to sneak through that grommet. Now guys, like I said, if you don't have a grommet here, you can do one of two things. You can put one here and come through the same spot that I did up top here, or you can go underneath the truck and come up through that way. So either way, it doesn't really matter. Mine just happened to have that, so I might as well use it. The other thing is, we need two sources here that we have to plug into. So basically we have a power, which you want to go into your green that comes out of your reverse light. Like I said, mine's already tapped. And you obviously need a ground. Now you can ground either with the reverse light, or you can ground like they have done when they put this backup assist or park assist in, and just ground to the truck. So since they've already got a spot there, I'm just going to cut this one off put these two together and go there, and then I'm also going to tap into the green. Now once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and put this thing back into place, and then we'll move over there to actually where we're going to hook up the license plate frame and camera. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and take the license plate off. And I know this bolt's rusty, or screw, bolt, whatever you want to call it. Somebody said the other day in one of my videos that bolt is rusty. I know. We'll replace him. I'll do it right now to make you guys happy, even though the truck's really dirty. But yeah, it does look like crap. So now that we got this out of the way, we can see what we need to do to get the license plate hooked to the new holder, which is this guy here. And really there's not a whole lot to it. The wire goes on the back. I'm not in love with the way that works. It looks like the wire could potentially get smashed. But so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go up and well, I take that back. I'm going to go behind the license plate like this, and then I'm going to come up on the back side of the bumper, and then we're going to go in right here. So that's essentially what I'm looking to do, or hope to do. We'll get this lined up. I'm probably going to go clean off my plate real quick just because it looks like crap, and I'll probably clean off behind here too, just so, I don't know, everything's clean. So I'll go get that stuff cleaned off, and we'll get this thing bolted into place, and we'll try to route some more wires. So I got everything cleaned up, and bad news, guys, I don't have any license plate screws that aren't rusty. But what I do have is some new plastic pieces to go over it. Now, normally I would want to do black, but I don't have any black ones, but I have chrome ones. So that's just going to have to do. I'll get some other ones at some point. I'm just going to get this started, and then we'll figure out where I want it to actually be as far as the wiring goes. I know I want to go behind the license plate, and there seems to be enough room there for that to happen. Yeah, there's definitely enough room. So the wiring, while I don't like it, it looks like that'll work. So we're gonna bolt it down here. I'd really like for it to come out more in the middle. So now we got that on. I'm gonna go ahead and snap these on to make people happy. Oh man, that looks terrible on that black. Okay guys, I'll go get some black ones, I promise. Or I'll keep digging around. I'm sure I've got some somewhere, I just can't find any. Yeah, that's not gonna work. Okay, I'm just gonna have to go get some new ones. We'll do that later. So anyway, now that I've got this hooked up, like I said, I'm gonna try to route it up from underneath here where it comes out just on the top side of the bumper. So I'll do that real quick, and then we'll talk about where we're going to hook it up. Like I said, I think we're going to do it under the carpet here, but we should be able to sneak through this rubber piece. So after messing around with it for a little bit, I decided to go right here. I didn't like the way it was bending that wire, and that's why I'm not a huge fan of these guys. I really like the ones that just, you drill a hole and they're flush mounted, but you know, you got to deal with what you got to deal with. So there is going to be a section here where you can see the wire. Pretty obvious there, but I'm going to go in between these two pieces. There's a nice little cutout right here where it's not going to be pinched, no issues. And so that's why I'm using that area. So when it shuts, we're not going to be smashing anything. And honestly, that works out really well. So now all we have to do is make our 2 connections. So we have yellow to yellow and red to black. And so what we'll do is, I'm going to peel this off the camera. And we'll go up front and see if we could test this thing out. So we're in the car, and let's put this thing in reverse. And as you can see, it's working. And I think our park assist is still working. We'll back, yeah. So everything is working good. I didn't put any of the plastics back on back there because honestly, I like to test stuff before I put everything back together. So we're gonna go back there and slap all that plastic back together and try to hide those wires. So back here, honestly, guys, there's not a whole lot to do. I'm just gonna tuck these guys underneath, and I don't want it to get in the way of that. So now we should be able to just snap this piece of plastic back on, and we should be finished. Oh, well, wait, nope. To all the haters out there for the rusted bolt, I gotta go grab one of those and then we'll be finished. So we're completely finished up, and I did go get some new caps, some black caps, so that looks a lot nicer than the chrome, and they stay on. Also got some new bolts, so I don't have rusty bolts under there. To all you guys that saw that before and talked about it, I will tell you guys there is an adjustment. So there's 2 set screws where you can adjust this up or down depending on the height of your vehicle. It actually worked right out of the box for me, so I didn't have to do that. You can see the wire if you look, but you can't see it in the car. I did go ahead and put the back seats back in, and sorry guys, it has gotten ridiculously windy right now, but everything is under carpet. Got everything right back where it belongs. Need to grease that door apparently. And let's take a look at it one more time. It's nice to have a radio, honestly, that I don't have to, or that I can hook my phone to. There we go. And you can hear my park assist thinking I'm gonna hit my truck here. But all in all, guys, a pretty easy project. Not really hard. It's time consuming, and honestly it took me a little longer than I thought it would, but that's kind of how it goes sometimes when you're trying to hide wires. And I soldered every one of those connections on the radio, but honestly for the money it's relatively cheap. I think I paid like 30 bucks, and like always I'll list all that stuff in the description down below. But yeah, I think I paid 30 bucks for the camera on the license plate frame, which, you know, like I said, I don't love the look of that, but there was really no other way to do it on this without cutting a hole in the back or doing some kind of body work. So I'm happy, especially for what it costs. Now I already had the radio, and I already had the installation kit. I didn't have the wiring harness. I did have to buy that, but I'll list that down below as well, guys. If you did enjoy it, if it's something you think you'll do, hit those comments, let me know, guys. And like always, smash that thumbs up button if you did enjoy. If you're not subscribed, make sure you go down, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you ring that bell icon, that way you're notified every single time we drop a new video. And well, stay tuned to see what we work on or buy or sell or I don't know next.